Oh, man.
Well, here's the thing about introductions.
I like this.
I actually don't like it when people on the web go, "Hey, it's me," blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, I know it's you. That's why I'm watching you. So I'm not going to say a word about that.
I'm totally playing by your rules right now. I'm very happy to follow.
Anyways, so Mike, I was listening to the radio on the way over here, and it was kind of a.
They played a bunch of my stuff, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. It was fascinating, but there was a lot of sort of this doom and gloom scenario about science and this kind of stuff, but overlaid with this sense of hope, right?
Yeah.
In terms of how technology can actually help us instead of hurt us. So my question is, as someone who's been a lifelong musician and in the business for so long, how do you not a business question, but how do you see music evolving? Because it's really struck me recently as I kind of continue to sort of look backwards and forwards at the same time, particularly with YouTube. You can go see videos of Monk and all the classic guys that are just extreme, right?
Right.
and then here we are now. So do you ever think about that or have any sense of kind of an evolutionary sort of thing?
I don't have like a shape or a pattern in my head. I do think about it. It's fascinating to think about, but it's I don't know. You framed that by starting by talking about technology, and I recognize definite Luddite tendencies in myself. And when I compare things that are happening now compared to, I tend to idealize the early '70s as a period where musicianship was really fresh. The influences were still new enough so that the way they were being processed and recontextualized was really fresh feeling. And audio technology was just at a point in history in the early '70s where it produced a sound that seems amazingly good to me and a lot of other people. I think there's a reason why a lot of people intrinsically are so affectionate for the music of that era, and obviously a lot of it has to do with what people were playing, but a lot of it is also has to do with the way it sounded.
Right.
Just really full and warm, and it's and it's very it's cliched to always use the word warm when describing analog sound and analog technology, but most cliches have more than a grain of truth to them. So I think that when as digital recording technology started to take hold in the 80s, that it caused some kind of mass hypnosis, and many musicians with great ears, had been proven to have great ears, got seduced and hypnotized a little bit by the clarity of digital, and you listen to that stuff now, and it's almost unconscionable what was done to music. And it was that was accompanied by people starting to ratchet up compression in order to make things louder. So obviously everybody recognizes that the earliest digital recordings, especially in pop music in the 80s, a lot of it sounded really strange. So I think a lot has been done to compensate for that since then, and newer digital recordings are warmer, but they do arguably feel less human than the stuff that we were in love with, and I think that humanity is a loss. Now, I say all that being super grateful for the flexibility of digital recording and the availability of the tools, and all that is fantastic.
Right.
But as with so many things, it's hard not to mourn what's been lost.
Well, I wonder, I wonder if people are looking for that. I hope maybe, I don't know, through various forms of live performance and things, where people actually can attend, and there's kind of a renaissance of certain sort of jazz styles that's not like a rebirth of an old thing, but kind of an approach, I guess.
Okay.
Where I start to hear things. I don't know if you've heard somebody like VJ Iyer or something like that, where just kind of piano jazz, but not really like a standard jazz form.
Okay, sure. Oh, yeah, sure.
And so, let's hope that that's kind of mediating that other kind of influences.
Well, yeah, it's out there. As with anything, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
Which is why you're going to see a huge rise in progressive activism over the next few years. But it's I love that format that you're describing. My friend Matt Mitchell, who's a keyboardist who also composes for small jazz groups, that it sounds nominally like jazz, but it heads in directions that are unpredictable, and you can feel the acquired knowledge and exposure to all kinds of culture and music over the last many decades that gets soaked into what is people hear the word jazz and they think it's going to sound like this, but it's all over.
It must swing. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of things with more straight time and interesting rhythmic kind of things, but maybe with these sort of harmonic overlays or whatever. I don't know.
I love that. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. So, well, yeah. So, the other thing I've noticed, and maybe you can comment on this, is
I don't mean to make you ask all the questions, but I'm enjoying this process.
Well, okay, cool. Well, yeah, we've all, people who have sort of, I don't want to say studied music, but sort of watched the evolution of players and musicianship over time. Right, so in that time period when you were talking about, to actually discover a great musician was something that happened almost by serendipity or through some kind of filtered process of editorializing where, I remember like when the first time I ever heard of Mahavishnu Orchestra, for example, was in Cream magazine.
It's amazing that's where you went, because that's when you said that, I precisely went to the first time I saw the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Yeah, and so, but now it's YouTube, right? I mean, that's the thing. And as a bass player, I've sort of had to come to grips with the fact that I could go on YouTube and find 100 people that are just monstrous players, that have technique and abilities that, you just couldn't find them, 30 years ago. It just didn't exist, and now it does. So there's some effect that's, there's some cause for that effect. Yeah. But I'm wondering if, and again, I sort of remain hopeful. I mean, it's kind of like there's a lot of noise out there, and there's this very high level of musicianship along with the noise. Yeah. So it requires a filtering mechanism to say, well, this is something that I can actually connect with or not.
Right.
And the only way that I found to do it is through my own trial and error. Literally just going through and listening to stuff, and maybe that's part of the evolutionary process that needs to develop here or something, which is some way to sort of, I don't know if editorialize is the right word.
Well, you can only rely on your instincts. I mean, you've only got a limited amount of time in a day, and it's so much stuff to process and filter. That you kind of have to. Everyone does it. You go by first instinct when you see a link that someone has forwarded to you, and it's one of 30 links that you've been momentarily intrigued by that day,
right?
And you don't have time to watch them all. You have to, and it's and that's informed by all kinds of prejudices and things that you have to decide. Am I going to listen to this thing that probably sounds like something I've heard before, or am I going to go in this direction that might be more challenging? And knowing you, I'm sure you probably tend to go for the more challenging things if you have a limited amount of time. But if you have the time and you decide, I just want a cross section of what's going on, or there's a million reasons why you might be tempted to click on a link and see what's going on. And there's so much that I don't see.
Yeah.
And I made peace with that many years ago.
Yeah.
And if someone hands me a disc on the road or something, and I accept it graciously always and with gratitude. Thank you for sharing this work with me. And but there's probably a little part of me that's like apologizing in advance, saying there's a good chance I won't hear this.
Right.
I don't say that out loud because I don't want to corrupt the moment or
and you may
negatively influence the thing. I might very well listen to it.
Right.
But I know that at the end of every tour I end up with a stack of stuff that and not the time to listen to all of it.
Okay, so actually this leads to a story that Anthony can edit out if he wants. But it's how I met him.
Okay.
And did I tell you this?
Tell me again.
Okay. So Anthony and I worked at the same company down here in Phoenix area, and he came to my office one day, kind of cold, and said, "Excuse me, but are you Andy West, the bass player?" Which happens like maybe 8 or 10 times in my entire 30-year computer career.
Really?
Yeah. Not very often, but interestingly, more in the last 10 years.
That makes sense to me. It takes time for this stuff to soak into the water supply.
But the point is, he came in and he said, "Oh, well, that's great. I'm a musician, blah blah blah," and he gave me a CD.
Okay.
And he said, "This is a CD I made with my dad," and I said something to the effect of, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll definitely listen to it. By the way, I hate almost everything." Or something to this effect.
That's
so
great.
Don't take it personal, but I'll definitely listen to it. And I listened to this album, and I had probably a year earlier reread Moby Dick again. It's kind of like one of these books that I go back to every now and again. And it turns out that this album was conceptualizing the story of Moby Dick, written by his dad, and Anthony played all the parts and produced it and all this stuff.
Too cool.
And this was like one of the I'm looking for an adjective here. I can't find an adjective to describe how I felt about this music.
Wow.
It was really interesting. Of course, I love the story, and the lyrics and the melodies were very unusual. And turns out his dad was, proudly unschooled. I would say, like he rejected, "Don't ever try and teach me how to read music or something, because I'm afraid it will corrupt me, I mean, a kind of a weird attitude, but,
He had a voice and he wanted to preserve it.
Yeah. So, it's like he was in the Amazon, living in the forest, and did not want to come out.
He liked it there.
So it was just a very interesting story because this album, it's not something I would like coldly recommend to anybody because it's very eclectic and weird, So I was like, God, what do I do with this? I love this, but I'm not going to tell like everyone go listen to this album because they'll think I'm nuts.
I run into that, and I've become involved in projects specifically because I thought that the music was so amazing, and how could the world not love this? Sometimes I get a little clouded about that just because I think something is so amazing. I don't know if I ever feel like frightened that people will work for my own sanity by recommending something though. But then I know, you don't just tell anybody that they should go check out Trout Mask Replica.
Yeah, right. Well,
you got to read the room.
Yeah, that's
a cool story. That's really cool. I want to hear that.
Yeah, Trout Mask. Well, okay. So just to jump haphazardly to another topic, when we first met, and you mentioned this Crazy Backwards Alphabet album that I did with Henry.
Which is
Henry
a
Kaiser.
really good album. That's just like that album was a real complete statement.
Yeah,
I like that record
it's a pretty neat thing. Now, of course, because on the internet, you'll see all kinds of people say things like just really horrible things about this stuff. Like what were they thinking? This kind of thing. But we were thinking all kinds of things and just sort of playing.
That's a good answer.
But it was fascinating to me because, of course, Beefheart was not part of my past.
Okay.
It's like I was sort of in the Allman Brothers, Led Zeppelin, Cream, that whole thing, right? And the Mothers too, for sure, but not like beyond the Mothers.
It didn't go far. Yeah. Exactly.
And so, but of course, so Henry had me playing all these Captain Beefheart songs that I had never heard, and also the approach to the songs was so different because it was not grounded in the kind of musical education that I had, which was very precise and harmonically, cohesive and all this kind of stuff, right? So it's very eye-opening to me, and to
because they're tone paintings, in a different kind of way.
So that was pretty cool. And
what I enjoyed about hearing you play that kind of stuff, not just the Beefheart stuff, but the sort of Beefheart influenced Henry stuff and whatnot, is how perfectly matched your approach and tone was for that kind of music. Like I listened to Rockette Morton his bass playing on Trout Mask, and I see I can trace the
parallel
lineage.
universe.
Yeah, well, just I see a link between your style and his style.
That's interesting.
And it's something to do with the attack on the strings and the musicality of it and the solidity of the sound and all this stuff and so, but of course, yeah, it's right. I mean, when I heard you in the '70s with the Dregs, it was all about precision.
Right.
And the Magic Band, the Beefheart stuff is about discipline, because they had to practice those songs a million times to get all of these disparate events to line up in any kind of way. But it's not about precision in the accepted sense.
Right.
But in a way it is, because you got to drill that stuff endlessly.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, okay, so along the lines of the original evolutionary sort of commentary, do you hear anything that is, I mean, what could you comment on besides yourself, which we can go to another topic on? I want to talk about Scambot before we leave. But do you hear any trends, or is there any, or is it just kind of like isolated? Wow, this is a really interesting approach that these folks are doing, or this guy is doing. I mean, do you hear any kind of overall trending?
Nah, I'm so out of touch. I mean, I regret the fact that I don't make the time to listen to everything that crosses my path. It's I would find it. I clearly do find it impossible to do so. But there's so much that passes me by that I wouldn't presume to indicate my awareness of a trend.
Well, okay,
but I hear good things a lot.
Yeah.
Something will come out, and it might be years after it's current. But I hear relatively new music. Like Scott Tunis gave me a recording of the band Field Music, like 8 years ago or something, and I really enjoyed it. And then I sort of didn't think about them anymore. And then Marco Miniman became obsessed with the band Field Music and started playing it on the Satriani bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I was aware of them. I had even heard their music years ago, and I went, yeah, that's really good. But then when I heard it a couple years ago again, I was reminded it's really brilliant. It's exciting, beautifully constructed pop music that in its field definitely deserves to stand alongside XTC and the best of Rundgren and all that stuff. Wow. And I love super well constructed, non-predictable pop music very much. I love a chord progression that is just beautiful. You don't see where it's going, but when it arrives, you realize, oh, that was the perfect solution. That stuff is so much fun for me, and Field Music has that in spades. So that's reasonably new music. That's brilliant. And but always my response when I hear something great unexpectedly is to be a little shocked and then to be super super grateful, to be reminded that I can be a curmudgeon as much as I want, but I can never really have the whole picture of everything that's happening, and there's always great stuff going on.
Well, maybe it's maybe part of this evolutionary thing I keep harping on is the fact that there is a lot, but you have to discover it. Maybe it becomes more of a it's like a localized thing. If you go back to kind of like the reason music is important to people or why people love music, there's an emotional thing there. There's a human connection kind of thing that's going on, or there should be, right? I mean,
ideally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I guess there are people that have, never experienced a profound feeling from listening to music, but that would be very sad to me.
Oh, it would be, and that's it's only occasionally that something hits me that makes me need to like go on the old social network platforms and share it. But when I saw Kendrick Lamar at the Grammys earlier this year, did you see that performance? No. Maybe the single greatest musical performance I've ever seen on television.
Oh my God! Okay.
So I saw this and had to spread the word. It's like, okay, if you think nothing's going on, wait till you hear this.
Right.
It's amazing. The not just the content of the words, which is powerful and huge, but also the actual content of the performance and the band that's playing, which is they're just like deadly great, and the musical conception, which is really evolved, and it's endemic of now what's happening in the sort of intersection between hip hop and DJ culture and jazz and spoken word and activism and all the stuff that's coming together in an insanely powerful way, and which will continue to do so. That's just like I Kendrick Lamar at the Grammys. That's all I
Yeah,
can say.
no, I'm going to have to go look at that. That's awesome. Well, I mean, I think about things like here in Phoenix. There's a I mean, I've looked, and there's kind of a dearth of opportunity for people to hear live music. It's really spare. There's a local club here that is set up as a nonprofit called the Nash, which is about jazz, but it's like purely jazz. I mean, they're not going to be doing other stuff.
Okay.
All
right.
Which I think is kind of unfortunate, because I think that there's room for other stuff. And kind of like a pure music venue where people don't need to go to buy drinks or this stupid thing.
That's why Anthony's gonna open the MWM club.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not in the room. Okay, we can divulge all of his plans. No.
Yeah, right. It's he's going to be right here in the living room. Of course, his wife has got something to say about that. But, no, it's cool though. But I think in New York or Boston, there seems to be more. Maybe it's just the concentration of cities. L.A. has baked potato, or but that's. I guess there's the other side of that is really that. Now you go to the issue of musicians and artists creating and how do they support themselves, and then the opportunities become, well, you have to be very creative about this, and if live is the only thing that's going to really do it, that's an issue. But yet we still do. I mean, people still create stuff no matter what. They're driven to it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's really the filter. The filter is, what are your motivations? What are your reasons? And if they're strong enough in the pursuit of expression, it'll happen.
You find a way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If that was a question, you just answered it.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just sort of musing on it, because
it's good to think about,
yeah.
And it's definitely good to, check yourself every once in a while. Does your drive remain strong? Check your motives. And just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
And people who
As Rankin Bass
I
once
mean,
said.
I have to put in a plug here for pragmaticism too, because I know a lot of musicians, and myself included, who have sort of taken a path of providing for themselves and their family through other means, having a day job or whatever, and back in the day, that used to be a real sort of sign of failure or something, or not necessarily a sign of failure, but it was not a sign of success, right? And now I feel like it's great if people can figure out how to make it work, and there's a lot of ways to do this, but again, it kind of goes back to your motivation, and sometimes they can kind of merge into a commercial successful thing, and sometimes not.
Well, it's your motivation and also your specific intent. It's like if your desire is simply to make music and not necessarily to be out on the road for months at a time,
right?
Then all of a sudden it becomes very practical and real smart to find a way to fund those activities,
Yeah.
I definitely have. I got involved with the School of Rock in 2007, and that was my attempt for a year at doing precisely that, holding down a day job, and it just became unworkable, because by the end of that year, Death Clock was touring, and then it just suddenly there was an impasse that couldn't be breached.
Right.
But it's there's certainly no stigma attached to it now, and I think it's obviously laudable and quite necessary in a lot of cases.
Well, it's another means. Although people who have a family and a job and want to do music,
yeah,
it's really it can be a lot.
It is. I absolutely admire anyone who has the psychic space to encompass all of that activity.
Well, okay. So, what else is on your mind?
Oh man. I'm I'm grappling with my schedule all the time, which is challenging. So I'm a little self-centered right now. It's like as soon as you said that, all I saw was stuff I have to do, and that's not at the expense. I don't want this to be a political conversation. So obviously the election is on my mind, and as it is on everyone's, and I'm just gonna have to see what happens there. But I'm feeling good. I just did a lot of live playing, and I was out touring with Beer for Dolphins with Brian Beller and Joe Travers, and then we wound up on election night at the Baked Potato, with Rick Masalem joining us. So we were a trio up until that last show, and then we were a quartet, which I saw as sort of crossing the threshold and Beer for Dolphins activity next year.
Awesome.
I want it to be quartet with Rick whenever it's possible, but it goes into finances. Touring just now on the East Coast and in the South and in the Midwest was so much more feasible with 3 players than it would have been with 4. Even in terms of van space and just all kinds of logistics. And I'm looking at the really scant amount of money that I maybe made on the tour. And
oh man. And I know.
But then I say that only because it's fresh and on my mind. It's an answer to your question. In December, I'm out on the road with Satriani for the month with in South America, and that covers my expenditure that I just put out on my tour. So that's the balance of my career anyway. Is like I'm lucky enough to have these mainstream touring gigs, and
with people that you like,
and actually really enjoy playing with. And it's like playing Satriani music is so different from playing my own. I gain so much from it. It's this the way he approaches these concise song forms, and how he very small gestures melodically, it just paints this complete picture that everyone responds to. And that's really thought-provoking for me, because I'm always like searching for that thing way out there, and Joe finds something that is like right here next to you, and when you hear it, you realize that's the perfect thing for that moment, and then you watch people's response to it in the audience, and it's fascinating to me what the endless recombinations of musical information and what you can do. It's so much fun.
I know, it's really when I listen, so of course I have all of Satriani's stuff, and I've seen you guys play with him, many times, well, several times at least, and I also have a similar reaction in the sense that I'm in the audience, so I'm kind of experiencing the music, but I'm also experiencing the audience and kind of fascinated by the whole thing. It's like, well, what is it that these people are really responding to? They're responding to something that's not something that I would normally conceive of, nor would I normally expect them to respond to what I'm hearing in the way that they are. So it's really cool.
Well, there's the basic themes are generally quite simple, so people grasp that immediately, take it in. The treatment is endlessly varied. It's like there are subtleties of articulation when he approaches the same melody in different parts of the song. He's really attuned to the emotional arc of a piece of music, which a lot of anti-guitar hero people might be surprised to even consider, because they think it's just about fireworks. And of course the fireworks are a huge part of it, and that's one of the things that keeps the audience kind of catalyzed and into it is just these sounds and occasionally flagrant displays of technique, because it's exciting. People respond viscerally to somebody who's really good doing something really well.
If they happen to show up, they will.
Exactly. And that's the other thing about Joe, because of the way he conceives things melodically, he puts out music that people embrace, and so he still has a major label deal after all these years, and still is able to do touring at a nice level of comfort, and believe me, as a musician who is very reliant on well-paying jobs in order to feed my addiction of making my own music.
Right.
I'm so grateful, that there is something like the Satriani gig where we get to tour nicely and play for a lot of people playing, instrumental music that's not the most immediately conventional thing,
right.
And that he gives me and Beller and Marco a place to be ourselves within this framework. It's not a completely orchestrated.
I definitely notice that, and you feel that, and I think that's super smart and appropriate.
And
I mean, you guys, you have something to add. Obviously,
and Joe enjoys it.
Yeah.
Joe enjoys the fact that we were adding that, and then the audience enjoys the fact that Joe is enjoying it, and
right.
the fact that and we're doing whatever we're doing.
Right.
It's the chemistry in the Satriani band right now is really cool, and kudos to Joe for wanting it.
Yeah.
And accepting it so much.
I agree. Oh, you want to wrap it? Okay.
You got any requested topics, Mr. G?
No, I think this is great.
Can we talk about the first 3 Chicago albums? Were you into them?
I think I was, but I think I was then.
Okay, when's the last time you heard that stuff?
Then.
Yeah. Check it out. Actually, I really like Chicago 5. The first
They're
5.
playing here. In
some version of Chicago?
Yeah, some version of them is playing here. I mean, I'm sure they're playing those songs and probably better than they did then.
I don't know. I'm a real Terry Kath enthusiast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm also a real Danny Serafin enthusiast, the drummer.
Yeah.
So there's a chemistry on the way those players sounded together on, for me, the first 5 records especially. So
I saw them play at the Atlanta Pop Festival.
Oh, well, that's cool.
And they were great.
Yeah.
They were great. And horns seem to be making a comeback.
Well, I was just thinking about popular music that stretches the conventions, and they popped into my head.
Yeah, nice.
Those records, it's just to wax nostalgic for a second about a time when Columbia Records would fund the first 3 Chicago albums were double albums with all sorts of weird musical experimentation with a million different genres and them just doing whatever they wanted. The 4th album was a live album that was 4 discs, the 4 record set with about 18 pounds of posters in it. They could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, right.
And the marketplace was supporting that at the time. And I don't know. I wouldn't argue with anybody who doesn't dig Chicago, but I have a real, obviously sentimental, but also I think somewhat logical affection for that early Chicago stuff.
Well, it's at least added to my YouTube list for
now. There you go. Yeah. Check it out.
All right.
Okay. Well, we good? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Make weird music.